MCAT 2017 Cram, Critical Analysis and Reasoning Skills. Flashcard Set 17.1, What is Life? As you view the reading of this passage, you'll notice some highlighted selections of text. What I want you to do is garner meaning from these specific snippets in order to answer the foundations of comprehension questions that follow the reading of the passage. There'll be 2 questions, and they're really not that bad. So good luck and happy reading. Paragraph 1. The greatest problem of biology is understanding the divide that exists between life and matter. There seems to be an unbridgeable gulf between them, but how could life have emerged from matter if it is fundamentally different from it? The received view today is that life is but an extremely complex form of chemistry, which is equivalent to saying there is no fundamental divide between them. Primordial, this word meaning existing at or from the beginning of time. Genes and primordial proteins appeared spontaneously on the primitive Earth and gradually evolved into increasingly more complex structures all the way up to the first cells. The basic units of life, the problem of which molecules came first, has been the object of countless debates, but in a way it is a secondary issue. What really matters is that spontaneous genes and spontaneous proteins had the potential to evolve into the first cells. This, however, is precisely what molecular biology does not support. Paragraph 2. The genes and proteins of the first cells had to have biological specificity, and specific molecules cannot be formed spontaneously. They can only be manufactured by molecular machines, and their production requires entities like sequences and codes that simply do not exist in spontaneous processes. That is what really divides matter from life. All components of matter arise by spontaneous processes that do not require sequences and codes, whereas all components of life arise by manufacturing processes that do require these entities. It is the signaling of these sequences and codes, or semiosis. Semiosis means the process of signification that makes the difference between life and matter. It is semiosis that does not exist in the inanimate world, and that is why biology is not a complex form of chemistry. Paragraph 3. The problem of the origin of life becomes in this way the problem of understanding how the first molecular machines came into existence and started producing new types of molecules. We have seen that chemical evolution could spontaneously produce bond makers, molecules that had the ability to stick subunits together, and we have also seen that some bond makers could become copy makers by sticking subunits together in the order provided by a template. The next step was the appearance of code makers, and that is much more difficult to account for. But in principle, it has the same logic, and we can regard it as a natural event. Ribosomes, for example, can still arise by a self-assembly from their components. What really matters is that molecular machines could arise spontaneously, and once in existence, they started producing molecules that cannot be formed spontaneously. More precisely, they started producing specific genes and specific proteins, and that is what crossed the gulf that divides inanimate matter from life. Paragraph 4. The genetic code was the first organic code in the history of life, but was not the only one. We have seen that other organic codes came into existence and that they account not only for the production of new biological objects, but also for the organization of these objects into higher structures and for their interactions with the external world. Semiosis, in short, was not limited to the production of specific molecules. There are at least 3 different types of semiosis in nature, and we find codes at all levels of life, from the world of genes and proteins all the way up to mind and language. Physics and chemistry provide, of course, the building blocks of life, but what animates matter is codes. And that is why there is a deep truth in the oversimplified statement that life is semiosis. It can be inferred from the passage that in the scientific community, the author's definition of life is A. Widely accepted, B. An alternative perspective, C. Part of the controversy over which molecules came first, or D. Fairly unimportant. I'll give you a moment to think. If you're having difficulty answering, definitely press pause and open up a second window to view the reading of the passage and search for the text support to select the correct answer choice. All right. Okay, so in this Foundations of Comprehension question, you're being asked to recall specific parts of the passage, such as the thesis, the examples and counterexamples, and you're also being tested on whether or not you understand their relevance within the context of the central theme of the passage. So the passage clearly does not believe that the definition of life is fairly unimportant, suggested by answer choice D, because in paragraph 1, the author wrote, "The greatest problem of biology is, quote, understanding the divide that exists between life and matter." Okay? So we can infer that the author's view of life is not widely accepted, contrary to what answer choice A says, from paragraph 1 as well, where the author presents the, quote, received view that life is defined as an, quote, extremely complex form of chemistry, which is equivalent to saying that there is no fundamental difference between them. Furthermore, at the end of paragraph 2, the author explicitly states that life is not just, quote, a complex form of chemistry, which shows that the author does not subscribe to the widely received view introduced in paragraph 1. Instead, the author juxtaposing, that's placing two starkly different things close together so that you can see the contrasting differences between them. So the author juxtaposes his alternative view of life, which is suggested by answer choice B in paragraph 2, as arising from the manufacturing processes that do not occur spontaneously. And lastly, the author explicitly notes that the order of which molecules came first is a different matter altogether, okay? So the correct answer is going to be answer choice B, an alternative perspective. All right? The author's central message for the whole passage is best summarized as A. Spontaneous genes and spontaneous proteins evolve into the first cells on Earth. B. What divides matter and life requires sequences and codes. C. Life is not made up of complex chemical processes requiring sequences and codes. Or D. Life requires a process directed by an intelligence. I'll give you a moment to think. If you're having difficulty answering, open up a second window to view the reading of the passage and search for the text support to select the correct answer choice. Definitely press pause if you need to. All right. Okay, so in this question, you're being asked to just recognize the central theme of the overall passage. Let's start by looking at some things in paragraph 1. In paragraph 1, the author explains how it is thought that the first cells evolve from spontaneous genes and spontaneous proteins, as suggested by answer choice A. And the author then goes on to say, quote, "This, however, is precisely what biology does not support." Furthermore, in the second paragraph, the author argues that what really divides life from matter is that life requires sequences and codes that are required to give rise to certain molecules and proteins. So this is suggested by answer choice B. But they're not required for non-living matter, okay? The author never argues that life does not have complex chemical processes. This is not mentioned. So answer choice C is out. And last, the author states that while molecular machines allow for non-spontaneous processes, these machines themselves are still the outcome of spontaneous and natural chemical processes with no implication of being directed by some intelligence. There's no mention of this either. So answer choice D is out, answer choice A is out. The default answer would be answer choice B. What divides matter and life requires sequences and codes. All right? Okay.